Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into some really fascinating research.
We are. It's looking at the potential link between fluoride in drinking water and, well, reproductive health.
Yeah, fertility, infertility, abortion rates. This Iranian study we're digging into, it suggests a correlation, right?
That's the word. A correlation between higher natural fluoride levels in water and lower fertility, more infertility, more abortions across the whole population studied.
And this is key. It gets a bit more complicated when you break it down by age group.
It does. This study comes out of West Azerbaijan province in Iran. They looked at 2 areas in Poldash County.
Okay.
And these places are quite similar in many ways, socioeconomically, diet-wise. But the big difference is the natural fluoride in the water. Very different levels.
Gotcha. So our mission today for you listening is to really understand this specific study. We want to unpack how they did it, what they found, and what it might, suggest about the bigger picture. Fluoride and having kids.
Exactly. And the source we're mainly drawing on is that 2017 paper, the ecological study from Poldash County.
Right. So maybe let's start with a bit of background on fluoride itself, just quickly.
Good idea. So most people know fluoride is linked to dental health.
Right. Preventing cavities.
Yes, but also things like dental fluorosis, which is more cosmetic, affecting tooth enamel. That's linked to levels around, say, 0.9 to 1.2 milligrams per liter.
Okay.
And because of effects like that, the World Health Organization, the WHO, they set a guideline upper limit. It's 1.5 milligrams per liter for fluoride in drinking water.
But I remember reading that the WHO guideline isn't totally rigid. It depends on how much fluoride you're getting overall.
That's a really important point, yeah. The WHO does say you need to consider the total intake, water, food, even air.
Right.
They suggest that maybe a higher level in water could be okay if your total daily fluoride intake is likely under 6 milligrams.
Did the Iranian study account for those other sources, or is that tricky with this kind of study design?
Very tricky for an ecological study like this one. They're comparing whole regions, not individuals. Pinning down exact total intake per person would be extremely difficult. They focused on the water concentration difference.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's mainly about the water exposure in these areas. And besides teeth, are there other health concerns linked to higher fluoride intake?
Yes, research has flagged other potential issues. Things like anemia during pregnancy, maybe low birth weight for babies.
Wow.
Also potential links to neurological problems. Some studies suggest impacts on IQ, maybe disturbing thyroid metabolism, and, relevant for us today, potential links to infertility.
Okay, quite a range of potential concerns. So let's zero in on this Iranian study. Poldash County, you said.
Yeah, Poldash County, West Azerbaijan province, northwest Iran. It's an area known for endemic fluorosis.
Meaning high fluoride occurs naturally there.
Exactly. High levels in the environment, particularly the groundwater. So the researchers picked 2 areas there. Similar people, similar lives, but different water.
Clever way to try and isolate the fluoride factor. What were the actual levels? You said low and high.
Yeah, let's get specific. The low fluoride area had a mean level of 1.90 milligrams per liter.
Okay, still above the WHO 1.5 guideline then.
It is. And the range there was about 1.46 up to 2.81 milligrams per liter.
And the high area?
Much higher. The mean was 8.0 milligrams per liter.
Whoa.
Yeah, quite a jump. The range there was 6.00 all the way up to 10.30 millijoule.
So both areas, even the low one, are generally above the WHO recommendation.
That's right. And the study actually noted that 85% of all the water samples they took across both areas combined exceeded that 1.5 millijoule limit.
Okay, so we've got these 2 areas of vastly different fluoride levels, but otherwise similar populations. How did they measure fertility and those other outcomes?
They used existing health records. They looked at women aged 10 to 49 living in the villages they selected.
So records data?
Records data, yes. Looking for fertility rates, cases of infertility where there wasn't an obvious medical reason.
Without known causes.
Exactly. Same for abortion cases without a known medical cause. And crucially, they tried to exclude women who had known conditions that affect fertility, like diabetes, obesity, or if they smoked or drank alcohol.
Trying to clean the data, make the comparison clearer.
Right. Trying to isolate that potential fluoride link. And the sample sizes were pretty big. Nearly 2,000 women in the low fluoride area, over 1,200 in the high fluoride area.
Okay, solid setup. We know the place, the levels, the data source. What did they find? Let's start with the overall results, pooling all the age groups together.
Right. So when they looked at the total group of women aged 10-49, there were statistically significant differences.
Yeah.
The low fluoride area had a higher fertility rate. It was 5.3% compared to just 0.5% in the high fluoride area.
That's a big difference, 5.3 versus 0.5.
It is, and statistically significant. Then, infertility without known causes, lower in the low fluoride area, 0.9% versus 2.0% in the high fluoride area. Again, significant.
Lower infertility where there's less fluoride. Makes sense with the fertility finding.
And the third piece, abortion without known causes, also lower in the low fluoride area, about 5.7% of pregnancies compared to 10.0% in the high fluoride area. And that was also statistically significant.
Wow. So looking at the big picture, it seems pretty clear. Lower fluoride associated with higher fertility, lower infertility, fewer abortions.
That's what the pooled data suggests,
I feel a butt coming. You mentioned something about age groups earlier.
You remembered correctly. This is the really crucial nuance. While those overall figures showed significant differences, when they broke the women down into 5-year age groups, like 20, 24, 25, 29, and so on, they found no statistically significant differences between the low and high fluoride areas for fertility, infertility, or abortion within those specific age brackets.
Hold on. So significant overall, but not significant when you look age group by age group.
Exactly.
That's puzzling. How can that be? Why would the overall trend disappear when you look closer at the age ranges?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The study doesn't give a definitive answer. One thought is, maybe the effects accumulate over time.
So looking at the whole 1049 range captures a longer exposure effect that gets diluted in the shorter 5-year span.
That's one possibility, yeah. Or maybe there are other factors, things they couldn't measure that vary with age differently in the two regions and kind of muddy the waters when you look at smaller age groups.
It definitely adds a layer of complexity. Shows you can't just take the headline finding.
Absolutely. It underlines why more research is needed to figure out what's really going on.
Now, this Iranian study isn't alone in looking at this, is it? Did they reference other research?
They did. They mentioned a U.S. study from back in 1994 by Frenany, which also hinted at a connection between higher fluoride in water and lower birth rates.
Okay, so similar findings elsewhere.
And maybe more mechanistically, there was a 2003 Mexican study. This one looked at workers who were exposed to much higher levels of fluoride, like 3 to 27 milligrams a day, way more than typical drinking water levels.
Right, occupational exposure.
Exactly. And in those workers, they observed hormonal changes, things like increased FSH, which is involved in reproduction, and reduced levels of other hormones like inhibin B, free testosterone, prolactin.
So direct biological effects at those very high levels.
Yeah, suggesting potential toxic effects on reproductive cells like Sertoli cells or gonadotrophs. But again, the exposure level is key, much higher than in the Iranian water study.
Got it. What about animal studies? Do they shed any light?
There was a rat study mentioned from 2000. They gave rats very high fluoride in their water, 200 to 600 milligl. Huge concentrations. They found negative reproductive outcomes. More resorptions like losing the pregnancy early on and fewer live babies born.
Okay, but again, those levels are astronomical compared to human drinking water.
Absolutely. Critical distinction. Right. Useful for understanding potential mechanisms, maybe, but hard to directly translate to human populations drinking water with, say, 2 or 8 milligl.
Did the Iranian paper mention any other human studies, maybe looking more at pregnancy itself?
Yes, a couple more. A 2012 study from Senegal. They looked at pregnant women in an area with high natural fluoride in well water.
Okay.
And they found an association between drinking that high fluoride water and having babies with low birth weight. They also saw a link with higher dental fluorosis scores in the mothers.
Interesting. Low birth weight.
And one more, a 2010 clinical study by Sushila. This one suggested fluoride might interfere with red blood cell production.
Yeah, so?
Potentially causing red blood cells to die off prematurely. And the study suggested this could be linked to things like premature birth and anemia.
Okay, so we're seeing a pattern emerge across different types of studies, population studies, occupational exposure, animal studies, clinical observations, all hinting at potential reproductive effects, though the exposure levels and specifics vary a lot.
That's a good summary. Hints and associations, but often with caveats about exposure levels or study design.
What limitations did the authors of the Iranian study themselves point out? They must have acknowledged some, right?
Oh, definitely. They were quite clear that because it's an ecological study comparing groups, not individuals, you can't really establish direct cause and effect.
Right. Correlation isn't causation.
Exactly. There could be other unmeasured differences between the regions contributing to the results. They explicitly called for more research, especially epidemiological studies that track individuals and can better control for those confounding factors.
And they must have flagged that weird finding about the age groups too? Significant overall, but not within the groups.
They did. They highlighted that as a key point needing more investigation. It really complicates the simple interpretation of the overall results.
Yeah, it makes you think, is it cumulative effects? Is it interaction with other age-related factors? We don't know yet.
Precisely.
Stepping back for a second, the study also put this into the context of infertility in Iran generally, didn't it?
Yes. They mentioned that infertility affects about 20% of couples in Iran, which they noted is similar to rates seen elsewhere globally. It's a significant public health issue.
And they brought up environmental factors.
They pointed out that contaminants in the environment, including things found in drinking water like lead, arsenic, chromium, and yes, fluoride, are potential contributors to reproductive problems that need investigation.
So the study is adding a piece to that puzzle, specifically looking at fluoride in a high-exposure area.
Exactly. Especially relevant in places like Poldash County, where, as we saw, most water sources were naturally above the WHO guideline level.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the main takeaway from our deep dive into this Iranian research. What should you, the listener, really grasp?
I think the core finding is this. The study did find associations. Living in the higher fluoride areas was linked to lower fertility, higher infertility, and more abortions when looking at the whole 10-49-year-old group.
Right, statistically significant associations in the overall data.
But, and it's a big but, those statistically significant differences disappear when they looked within specific 5-year age ranges.
A really crucial piece of nuance.
Absolutely. So it highlights a potential concern, adds to the evidence suggesting fluoride might be linked to reproductive health.
But it definitely doesn't prove it.
Not at all. And the study authors themselves stress the need for more detailed research. Better controlled studies are needed to confirm anything and figure out the how and why.
It's been a really interesting and definitely nuanced exploration, considering fluoride is so common, not just in water, but toothpaste, other sources. This kind of research really makes you think.
It does.
So maybe a final thought to leave our listeners mulling over. Given this potential link, however complex and uncertain it still is, what questions does this raise for you about environmental factors and reproductive health, maybe in your own community or just globally? What more would you want to know?